Right then, gotta have a gimmick. The time has come to finally do a video on Metagrid and Cubase. And I've been meaning to do this for a while, but I've just been so busy. So many deadlines. I've just been doing a library album actually, and Metagrid's come into its own for it. So I said I'd show how I'm using it and how I'm using Metagrid to control my template. That all of this is work in progress as well. So it's just how I'm doing things at the moment, and some of it's just to test things out, and some of it's excessive. And you know, let me see if my iPad's connected. Hopefully it is. No, something to do with screen flow. It disconnects it when I connect this. Okay, that should be working now. Good. Right. One of the reasons why I bought Metagrid was just purely because I loved the idea of being able to press a button and actually showing tracks that I want to see. So, you know, for the prices, why not try it out, man? It's only a few beers. So, if you look on the iPad, you've got main, MIDI 1, audio 1, visibility, mixer, transport, and media bay. I added the media bay because I was doing a bit of I was using some loops and some stuff, and I needed some quick access buttons. It's just work in progress, really sparse. It's not finished. But let's just concentrate on the visibility for a minute. And I figured because this is such a big topic to talk about, I thought let's show how this works with the template and then how to do it with the PLE commands. If you don't know what that is, the PLE is the Project Logical Editor. And we have one from Midi as well, Midi Logical Editor, and they are two different things, although they look the same. So this template has got 2,332 tracks in it, which is a little bit silly, I know, but I'm just playing around and, you know, listen. I put the entirety of Spitfire chamber strings and symphonic brass as well, and Hans Zimmer drums, percussion. I just wanted to actually be able to play them all the time and try and learn them as intimately as I can. So what we've got here is piano. I'll put the headphones on for this. So we look at, I've got to stop saying so let's look at the iPad, and if we press Spitfire chamber strings will just come up. And there's a bit of latency here, and the more tracks that are in folders, the more latency you get, but it's a hell of a lot less time than waiting or scrolling through 2,000 tracks. It just takes forever. But as you can see, only Spitfire chamber strings is here. Stack. Let's see if it works. Cinematic studio strings. Hopefully this still works. I don't know. Damage. Choose to damage. I'm just showing you how they work and how quick it is. Now, the buttons on the top are strings, brass, woodwinds, orchestral percussion, and so on. And the point of these buttons is, if I wanted to see all of the string libraries that I have in the template in one go, I'd press strings, and it takes longer because there are more tracks. But if we scroll down, we see cinematic studio strings suddenly there. Then we see Metropolis Arc 1, Albion 1 strings, Albion 5 strings, and so on. I haven't got everything I own in this template, but you know, you do hit a ceiling where your computer can't handle it, and this is behaving rather well if you look at the CPU meter down here. I mean, that's running 2,332. It's pretty good. A lot of it, I say a lot of it, about a quarter of it is on instrument tracks that are disabled. and I use those for things like Hybrid 2, Project Alpha, and Bravo. They're great libraries. I just don't use them all the time. But I like having them all here named, and then I can just literally press disable track or enable, and then they're there. And they're all grouped and routed. So before we get into how to do this, let's go on to the mixer as well, because this is quite a cool feature using Cubase's visibility stuff. Where is it? Okay, so these blue buttons on the iPad, I've got VST and audio outputs, MIDI tracks, all groups, non-orchestral groups, orchestral groups, effects tracks, stems, and then one spare. And if I press VST and audio, suddenly on the mixer, all my audio and VST tracks appear. If I press MIDI tracks, only the MIDI tracks appear, unless I haven't updated it, of which, when you update new tracks, like a new group, it will show, and we have to get rid of it and then update the configuration, and then it will remember. But I don't really go into this part because, I mean, I've submixed on V Pro. All groups. I say all groups I want to see with that button. Non-orchestral groups, guitars, such and such, orchestral groups, and this, like I just said, I've been doing an album that's been rock and electronic stuff, and I just haven't updated this yet. I've got to get rid of some of these groups, but you get the idea. And then I've also got a stems one. So, I mean, most of the big guns out there seem to have a third computer with Pro Tools, and they hit record and stream everything off using Midi cards, and I can't afford that. So if I press stems, this is set up for a band setup. I've got rock drums, cymbals, electronic drums, bass guitar, guitar stem, guitar synths, because I was doing some electronic shit with the guitar. Pardon my English. Whatever. I am English. Transitions and hits, synth stem and guitar effects, and then the outputs of those go to the inputs of audio channels in the project window, and then I just hit record the audio streams, and then I just batch export with Cubase's batch export. But I just thought I'd show those buttons because they're quite handy, like just to instantly navigate. Go away. Now, if we go through how to do this, how to create these buttons, we just use Spitfire chamber strings because it won't be confusing that way. Okay, this is good. Right. This is like the 4th time I've tried to make this video, by the way. It's just like run out of memory and whatever. But it's quite tiring going over the same thing when no one even knows you have. One thing I will say about doing stuff with Metagrid and creating so many key commands and macros is that you need to have shortcut keys for certain things. You need to have a shortcut key for device setup, where you've got your macro, your generic remotes, your 3 generic remotes. The third one is for macros. I've assigned that to F7 on the Mac. I've also got the PLE, Project Logical Editor, on F13. I've got, if I press Shift and F14, I've got the MLE, Logical Editor. And you definitely want to have key commands and macros on whatever you choose, but I've put F16. I also have preferences on F18, but we don't need to even look at that today. So let's have a little look at key commands and macros. Spitfire chamber strings. Now, obviously, if you've never made a macro before, click new macro, and then you'll be asked or prompted to type the name of the macro. And in this case, I want to call it Spitfire chamber strings. And these are all the sub processors in order to make all this stuff happen. And it's a lot more than just showing one track, and I'll explain all of this. Firstly, if we look again on the iPad, I'll hit the edit button. Let's go into Spitfire chamber strings and the action queue. And you notice that I've just got macro 117. And the reason why, if you now look at the actual screen, you can see how many processes there are, especially with these scenes, and they're all doing their own unique thing as well. If you're going to use these features on the iPad, like the pause feature, you have to choose the right amount of pause time for each command to actually work in sequence. Because if you don't, you'll find that Cubase will trip up and all of it just becomes this mess. Also, which I'm about to get onto now, every single time that you press one of these buttons, I'll press on scene 116 in a second to explain this. For me, it's not good enough just having a button that shows me Spitfire chamber strings. I also want to always have these channels showing, and this is called the track divide list. And above it, I just nickname them the important tracks, the video tracks, your click track, your time signature, tempo, marker tracks, all that kind of stuff, dialogue, Foley. And the problem is, if you don't set up a PLE command, these tracks always hide every single time that you select brass. They all disappear. So this is where that scene 116 comes into. So if we open up the PLE, and if you set this up properly, you've already got the Metagrid folder with all the scenes. So you put that in there. And I've chosen 116 purely because you have to put this on every single button that you create. Every single Cubase macro that we create, we've got to put this in there. So I just thought 116, I can mindlessly scroll to the bottom, hit enter, and then it's, I can select it without thinking about it. That's the only reason it's that number. So here, if you see here, it says media type is equal to marker or equal to tempo or signature or video. You can see that we've got the marker tracks here, we've got the tempo, the signature, the video, and I then have said I also want media type an audio track with the exact names, VO, guide, effects, DX, 2-pop. We'll stop there for a second. They need to be spelled exactly the same. VO, capitals. You can't even name that and you can't have a space after it and not have one there. It has to be identical. So you don't need to call it VO, you call it whatever you want. But I have a VO track there for something that I've been doing with some studies is you get a script, but you don't get any rough dialogue. So you have to actually say that script yourself for timings to write around. So having a VO track is quite cool to actually be able to record into it and then bus it to whatever you want. 2-pop's always handy to have in there. And then obviously I have a click track that's going through, well, let me bring it up. If you didn't know this, press command on there and hit that. I've got activate MIDI click and I've assigned Groove Agent with a Yuri click sample to be my click track. And the reason I've done that is so I can actually print stems of the click track. And I can also create rubato click tracks and print those. It's quite a cool thing to do. And Cubase allows you to do it. In regards to the PLE, instrument tracks are the same as MIDI tracks, so you won't be able to find an instrument track. So basically, we want to tell it the media type as well to find MIDI tracks, and they have to have the exact name of click, tap, and click. And that's where you see these. So if you create that, let's go back to the macros. After you've put hide all, we then put scene 116 in there. So let's build that. Hide all. When you press that with just hide all, literally everything in the project's going to hide. Makes sense? Scene 116 then will show those tracks. The next thing, right, I have to explain something here because if you just want to know how to do that, how to just press a button, have your tracks and have those top ones, then it's all good so far. You don't need to know about this thing called MIDI dump. MIDI dump is a kind of an idea I had a while ago, and I'll show you how it works. It's completely to improve workflow. Let's get rid of this. Now, I'm just going to play some notes in, just anything. It really doesn't matter. So at least make it so it doesn't actually sound completely like Sonic Dogs Brown. Okay. Now let's say that we're writing a track or a piece of music, whatever you want to call it, and we've got hundreds of events, hundreds of tracks all playing, and we start choking the computer and we want to bounce it to audio, which is kind of standard, isn't it? Now, I never want to delete the MIDI data, just, you know, so we can always go back, because I think it's really important to keep all the MIDI data. So I need to hide it somewhere. And basically, I used to have one folder called the dump folder, and I used to dump all of it like a trash can, like a toilet, and used to dump this MIDI data, but it just became this unwieldy bird's nest of stuff. And I then started thinking, how about folders in each part of each instrument, each template? So if we go to the main page, and I press on the right hand side, we've got 3 white buttons. We've got MIDI dump folders, purge, and then flush. It's like a 3-way flush system. So I press MIDI dump folder, and all of a sudden you see underneath here, MIDI dump V appears underneath each one. If we press minimize, we can make the track smaller. MIDI dump V on every single one. So it's like its own personalized toilet. It's a horrible analogy, I know, for your masterworks to go into a toilet, right? But anyway, I want to render that to audio. So obviously I've created render and render setup on here. Now, if they're vPro tracks, you need to choose complete setup path. And I could have clicked render there, but why not show it with that button there? And then we just have to wait. Anyone else's studio like an oven? Right, okay. It's set by default on the render setup to mute the part, which I always like. But let's just say that we've done this now with 20 parts over this for this intro. And I want to get rid of this. Basically, if I make that smaller so we can see the dump folder, the V on MIDI dump V stands for visible. And I'll get around to this in a minute, explaining why it has to be renamed. But what I want to put this in the MIDI dump folder, but I still want access to the ensemble spiccatos. I don't just want to copy that and dump it in there, because I then no longer have that articulation to play with. So the method you would have to use is duplicate that track, then disable the duplicate, then drag the duplicate into the MIDI dump, and then go back to the original track and then delete the MIDI data, and then you're free to use it. And it's a bit long-winded. So we've got one particular button, purge. And if I press purge now, see what it's done? It's duplicated the track and it's kept the data on it. It's disabled it, but it's also deleted the data from the original track. Now the next step is to literally drag it into the dump folder. And then press MIDI dump folders, and it's just gone. It's flushed, it's hidden away now. I've kept the MIDI data. If I need to ever go back, it's all routed as soon as I enable the track again, and it's all named and labeled. What's not to love? And at the end of the project, track, whatever you're working on, when the MIDI dump folders fill, and this was the reason why I asked an amazing Cubase guru, he must be a wizard when it comes to Cubase anyway. He helped me do all this stuff, and he made it become a bit of a reality, so I had no idea how to do any of it. And I said, at the end of the project, I want to empty the dump tracks. Like, there's so much stuff in there, it's such a hassle to do this, even if I press a button that says show tracks with data. So we created a flush button, so it's literally flushing the toilets. And if I press that track that we've just put in there, let me open it, it's gone, it's just vanished. If I press 7 again, 7, Z, I don't even know where it's gone. It's because so many commands has happened since pressing that. Undo move selected tracks. Undo delete. So that was like 5 steps just with that one button, which is kind of why I couldn't use the Metagrid pause feature, because there's just so much going on with each function. But like I've explained, that's how, if we disable that track again, put that into MIDI dump, and the reason that, well, the later commands, the reason why they're purposely shut, so when you open them, when you reveal them, they are always shut, so they hide themselves, and it's just kind of slick to hide your stuff. But anyway, let's go back to the key commands now, the macros. Now I've explained, now you understand what MIDI dump means. It's just literally a nickname I gave it. It's highly crass, but hey. Scene 116. So we've done that. That's the important tracks. Then rename all to MIDI dump. If you don't want to do the MIDI dump thing at all, then just ignore the dump stuff and it will work. But for anyone that's interested, I'll show you how to do this as well. Rename all to MIDI dump. So let's go to the PLE. Rename all to MIDI dump. So if you copy that, container is equal to folder track, name contains MIDI dump, has to be spelt exactly like that. Name, replace, MIDI dump. Okay. Next step is scene 018. So we go to the PLE and create this PLE command. And this is what you have to do if you want to actually do the button thing without the dump thing anyway. So go into scene, find the scene. And it's only 18 how it's worked out. If I put on the iPad the visibility, the top left-hand strings one was 001, then brass was 002, then and woodwinds was 003. And it's just how it worked out. It's just 018. So this is really important that you get this correct, because you have to name the folders exactly how these are named here. So you're going to type container type is equal to a folder. So it's saying it's targeting a folder, and the name of the folder has got to be exactly, which equal Spitfire chamber strings. And you can name it what you want. It's completely up to you. Track operation is to hide the track, but you have disable, so it doesn't hide this, it reveals it. So if you think about the three macros, or sorry, that's the wrong terminology. If we think about the 3 commands in the macro that we are building, so far we've hidden everything in the project. Scene 116 is to show the important tracks. Rename all to MIDI dump. This is injecting the MIDI dump folders into the project. Scene 18 is now revealing just Spitfire chamber strings, and the next process project logical editor command that we're putting in is mg unfold all visible. So go up here and find process logical preset. Wrong, sorry, that's wrong. Go to project logical editor, and then go to Metagrid unfold all visible, and then click add commands. And then that 18 will show Spitfire chamber strings, but that will make sure that all the folders open, or unfold, I should say. The next 2 steps are involving the dump thing again, so ignore them if you're not interested, but we've got to go on to rename MIDI dump. So container types equal folder track, and name is equal to MIDI dump, and property is property not set is hidden. Then name append v, track operation, folder close, track operation, hide track, enable. So what this essentially means is that this is going to folderize and close the track, and it's going to hide it. Just so when you press Spitfire chamber strings, we don't see the MIDI dump folders, but we know that they're there, and we know that they're all closed. It's just by design, that is this, how I wanted it. Make sure you pay attention to these function buttons down here, because I sometimes miss them, and you wonder why nothing works. And also, if you try something out on the iPad, make sure that the PLE or the MLE isn't open, otherwise it plays havoc. So do that PLE, then next one is hide MIDI dump. And container type is equal to folder track, and the name is equal to MIDI dump V. And then track operation is hide track, and make sure. And this is what does hide the MIDI dump tracks, so we don't see them. When you press a button, you just aren't any the wiser, none the wiser. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle, and this, everyone needs to do this if you want these buttons to work, regardless of the dump idea. And I'll explain why. Right, scene 115, same philosophy, just so I can scroll down and I know scene 115 is at the bottom. Let's go there. Now, this was making me pull my hair out a little bit for a while, because I was wondering what was going on. When you, let's just say that we've selected, I don't know, whatever, staccato notes, and now we go to damage. When you play the keys, you're still hearing the staccato notes because it hasn't disarmed the track. So you have to have this at the very end, and it will disable the record arming, and then only damage will play, or whatever library you actually select afterwards. So that's really important. Otherwise, it just will always have the last ones armed. So media type is equal to MIDI, bracket and bracket, and track operation is record and disable, and make sure transforms on. And that will, well, that is exactly how you get any of these buttons to work. I just need to go back for a minute. I've just literally done exactly what I shouldn't do. There we go. Right. Okay, so let's just test it. The latency is livable for me. It's workable. I don't particularly mind it. It takes a lot longer scrolling through 1,000 odd tracks. And those tracks always stay. Something that you should bear in mind if you do that MIDI dump thing. You notice here I have VSL Percussion Special Edition. I haven't bothered loading anything into this yet, but the way this works with the MIDI dump folders, you absolutely have to have a MIDI track or an audio track next to the top folder, because if you don't, they all just disappears. It relies on being at the top, which I know that sounds complicated and stuff, but if you do this and make folders like this and put the MIDI dump folder in, where is the MIDI dump? See, I have a MIDI dump folder there, but if I didn't have that MIDI track, all of that would just disappear when I press the button. So it's just something to bear in mind before we get a few emails saying I've broken the computer or something. But anyway, that's the visibility. So I think now, I mean, other ways that I use Metagrid, let's do the MIDI editing thing, man, because that's what's killer about this. We'll stick with, actually, no, sorry, I've missed something really vital here. You've created the macro, okay? Sorry, it's because I've done this video a few times now that I keep thinking I've already gone over it. We've created the macro. So if we look at the next one I've got here, Spitfire Symphonic Brass, and it doesn't matter if it's Spitfire, honestly, it's anything. It's exactly the same apart from the custom one for the name. So that's scene 14. And if we go here, I've just got that. It's the same one, but it's called Spitfire Symphonic Brass. And it must be called exactly what the folder is, otherwise it won't work. So now, the final actual piece of the puzzle is to assign it. Like, we've got to assign it. We know that Spitfire chamber strings is 117. So in here, on the third generic remote, go to 117, or whatever number that you've assigned it to. Click Command, choose Macro, because we just created a Cubase macro. And then in the list of macros, you should see Spitfire chamber strings, and then select that. Click Apply. And this is really important, because if you don't do this, then you'll be wondering every time you load Cubase why this entire macro sheet is empty. You need to export it. And I've called it, the original one is called Metasystem Macro, but I saved my own one, just so A, I know what it is, and B, it's my own custom one. Select it and save over it, replace it. And now when you restart Cubase, they'll all be there. And it took me a little while to figure that one out as well, but I don't know if it's just a quirk of Cubase or what, but that's a good thing to remember. Now when we go on to here, select Action Cue. So macro, let's just do it from scratch. Let's create a button. Let's call it SCS. Let's put an icon, instruments. You don't have to do any of this, but we'll put violin in. I'll change the color to white, and then fill black, and then assigned, no, action cue. What we want to do is select macro 117. So find Metagrid macro. Macro 117. There's our violin. And obviously we need to be on another page to prove this works. So I'll press it now, and that should take us to Spitfire chamber strings. Voila. Okay, that is how you assign commands, how you create the macros, and how you assign the macros on the iPad. And that's all you need to know for that kind of stuff. I guess now what we can show are some of the PLE commands that I've assigned on here. So if we look on the Midi page, we've got various things. Let's start with the controller lane data. So these are controller lanes. Sorry if you already know this, and this is me teaching how to suck an egg. I've never personally sucked one myself, but never say never. Basically, if I press this bottom button, that shows me velocity, mod, expression, vibrato, volume, and sustain. The next one will show me piano lanes, velocity, mod, expression, then mod, expression, vibrato, and portamento, slur, volume, and SF controls. I haven't assigned this to anything, but if you don't know how to do this, let's just say that we want velocity and I don't know, who cares, main volume. We'll get rid of these. I want to make it will remember how big you leave these. Let's say I want it this big. So now we go into here, click on this little page, and we're going to add preset. And this is going to be the 5th one. And they are actually in numerical order. You can't just, if you drag them around, it'll change. And I know that's a bit vague, but I'll explain why in a second. Add the preset. Controller lane config 5. Okay, so if I press the bottom one again, it takes me to that. Second one's piano lanes, then velocity, mod, and expression, then mod, expression, vibrato, and portamento, and then the next one will be the one we just created. And that's how you literally remember it. And say that you don't want it that big, and we move it there and we're working on it, and then we go back to the second one, but now we go back to there, it's obviously remembered its original format. So to change that, you have to go back to the page and then add preset and call it exactly what it was, overwrite it, and now it will remember it like it was. And the controller lane buttons are really helpful. Two that are included that you don't have to make like that, show and hide controller lanes and all UCCs. So if I press that, only the UCCs, which is velocity, or if I press that, it just hides them all. So they're pretty useful. And they're Cubase ones, so if we select it, Action Q, hide, show hide controller lanes, that's under Midi, and then there it is. So a lot of the controls are there. Now, all used. Let's do fixed velocity. So if I want to change all these notes to fixed velocity of 91, I press the 91 button, or the 51, or 61, 71. So let's do one of those, and then you just change the number, and it's the same. Select velocity. Let's do 51 to 60. So change the filter target is to basically to target a note, and the velocity has got to be inside the range of 51 to 60, the brackets, and then make sure that's on select. So when we press that, it should just select, yeah, it's found those. Or if, what's that one there? That's 106. So if we change that to, I don't know, 107, that should select it. What a silly thing I've just done. Obviously it's going to select all of those. Let's do 100 to 107. And then it finds it. So it's up to you. Change what you want on there. When you want to select a velocity, sorry, I've just done the wrong thing. That's select a velocity. If you want to do a fixed velocity, let's say 111, that will change that now to 111. Same with that. So type is equal to note, value to, set to fixed value, and whatever value you want to set it to fixed to, and transform. It's pretty handy. That shows how to do that. Okay, how to do beat, how to select downbeat 1 and then beat 2 and beat 3 and beat 4. These white buttons show how to select beat 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, how to do that? One second. The studio is so hot, it's outrageous. Not getting air conditioning is one of the most foolish things I've ever done. Select, I know, poor me. Select beat 1 every bar. This is slightly different than beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4 because you have to actually tell it the end buffer. Let me put beat 2, and this will be much more explainable. Okay, so here the bar range is done in 16ths. Each one is a 16th. So that is beat 2, that's beat 3, and that's beat 4. Now think of the blue, like the absolute grid is there, and nobody plays, so everything is perfect, and there's latency on the keys. So think of this blue bar as like a buffer, and you want to sort of catch the note, the front of the note. So if I did this, if I made this buffer too big, it would catch notes either side when I hit on the second. If I hit apply, look how many notes it catches. It's far too much. So you have to work out how much of a little buffer thing that you want to apply. I don't know what the term is for it, but a buffer seems right to me. And then you do the next one, save that as beat 2, then do the next one as beat 3, beat 4. And like I've just explained with the kind of the buffer thing, this is why beat 1 is different. Whereabouts is it? Select beat 1. Yeah, so you've got to recreate another inside bar range, but you've got the little buffer there on the front end, on the back end of the note, but you've actually got to tell it to look for just before. Imagine that bit of the blue just before there. So you need to do that. That's the only one you need to do for beat 1. And on the iPad as well, I've started creating these. I touched on this in the other video actually, but I didn't show how to do it. I've got beat 1, and then the second 16th, third 16th, fourth 16th, beat 2, and so on. And these buttons, they select. If you press beat 1, it will select beat 1 of every bar inside the event, and same with beat 2, and all of them are selected throughout the whole event. But we're just working on some new ones that literally only select in the cycle range, which is much more useful because say you have a drum take that's completely MIDI, say you're working on a pop song and you just want to select certain velocities in the chorus, then you can, as long as you put the locators. But unfortunately I can't show you that because I haven't implemented it yet. But to do that, it's the same, it's exactly the same thing in these bar ranges. Beat 1 is always going to be that, but all the rest, just literally draw the buffer in each one. You can work it out mathematically. Some people like 10% either side, but that's how you do note selection. And sometimes, you know, when you put the quantize to 64 and stuff, you start hitting other notes. So you've got to, it's really trial and error with that. What are the other things? Let's do some deleted. Let's do some delete buttons because they're always useful. Let's say we've got some muted notes. I've got a button that deletes muted notes, and that's really handy, especially when you comp other MIDI tracks together and then there's just a load of them. So if we go back to the logical editor, delete muted. It's really simple. Property is set, event is muted, so it's basically targeting any event that's muted, and just make sure that's on delete, and when you hit it, they delete. And obviously all of these, I know that this isn't strictly Metagrid, but you assign that then in, if you press F7, we just do it on 189, command, process logical preset, find the delete. I'm not going to export it because I don't want to save this, but remember 189. It's really weird talking in these. I can't hear anything. Let's create a button quickly. 189, same as before. It's a macro, so it's just one single thing. Del mutes. Okay, now when you press on Metagrid, you must close the logical editors, otherwise it does go weird. And I didn't realize that at first, and I was wondering why everything I was doing didn't work. So press delete mutes, and then they delete. That's pretty good. I can't remember if Cubase has got. I think Cubase has got transpose and octave because they're essential as well. Yeah, they do. In musical context, transpose highest pitches 1 octave down and up. So they're already done for you. Right. What other ones have we got then? We're going to need to program, or say program, just play a few notes in of something legato. Just to show mod and expression. Sorry, that's a bit loud. So, I don't know, just play anything. This should have mod, expression, vibrato. I guess we can move volume as well. I mean, this is going to be terrible. Hey. Exactly, that's all I wanted. Now, I have buttons for deleting modulation, deleting expression, deleting volume, deleting vibrato. And this is, it makes editing so quick. I also have, well, I'll show you how to do one of those, and then you can actually edit the rest yourself. CC1 delete. So type is equal to controller and MIDI controller number equal CC1, and make sure that's delete. So we'll try it out. Okay. If you change that to 11, that will now delete expression, save it as that, and you know, the rest is history. So another useful one, let's get rid of main volume, delete volume, and delete vibrato. Another really useful button is to copy the mod to the expression. So if I press mod to expression, it copies it straight off. And then I've got mod to volume, mod to vibrato. It's quite handy. I'll show you one of those, and then it's just easy to change them again. Copy CC1 to CC11. Press apply. Type is equal to controller and MIDI control number equal CC1. And then value 1, set to fixed value, CC11 expression, insert. Here's a cool macro. How to copy the mod data and put it onto another track completely. So if I press a button here, copy modulation. Now let's get out of here, and just for speed, let's just copy that. Delete all CCs. Okay, so let's just pretend it's empty. If I press paste, when you press the copy modulation or copy expression, it's literally going to the clipboard. So if we press paste, that's now copied onto another track. So it's pretty cool. You can do that with the notes as well. Delete all CCs, really useful. So we'll show you how to do that. CC1 copy. So we have to create this and then go into the Cubase macro commands and create a macro. Type is equal to controller and MIDI controller number is equal to CC1. Make sure all this is doing is selecting. So once we've got that, let's call it CC1 copy. Going to show macros, and I've already created this, so it should be just easy to show you. Copy CC1. So you need to select the PLE, the MLE command, Project Logical preset, add it once you find it. So it's in here, CC1 copy, select that, add that command. Then the next one, go to transport locators to selection. There it is. And then add that command and then go to edit and then copy. And then save that and do what we've already done and go into the device setup. And then apply it to a macro, assign it, and then you have that as well. There's so much. I don't know how long this video's even been going on for. Got a secret page. Do you know with Cinematic Studio Strings, you know how there's 5 different types of latencies? Well, obviously in Cubase, and I'm pretty sure Logic has the same kind of thing, but you can offset the track here, track delay in milliseconds. Now, if you do that on the whole track is affected. And if you're playing with different latencies on the same track, that's ridiculous. So I decided to get 5 buttons, and each one offsets 50 milliseconds, 100, 150, 200, and 300 milliseconds. So if you know, let's just say that we played this in and the short notes had 50 milliseconds, we can press 50 and it shifts them back 50. Or if we know that these legato notes were slow and adagio speed, then we press 300 and it nudges them back too. So they're quite handy for that kind of thing. Let me show you the key command for that. Offset selected MIDI notes by a certain value. So you just change the value. So type is equal to the note and property is set, so event is selected. I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast over this, but you can pause it and look at this. Change that to 50 milliseconds and make sure that's on transform. And then change, if you want 100, change it to 100, then 150, then whatever you want to do. And I will leave with one last thing. I mean, if there's questions, if people have questions about this stuff, and there's loads of stuff I've missed out, then get in touch, and I can obviously make another video. But I've been talking for about 4 hours, so hopefully this is enough anyway for now. But here are 4 buttons that I love. Let's just say that this part is a masterpiece of a performance, right? Absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. And this part here, quite frankly, is very undesirable. I have a button that will select lane data before the cursor or after. So if I select before, I can just delete, or I can press the delete buttons and delete after. Select that. That's pretty handy. Doesn't affect the note, and then you can go over and do another pass with the CC data's controllers, I should say. So that is, what is that called? Yes, it's called that. Delete controller lane data before cursor. Type is equal to controller and MIDI control number inside range CC0 to CC127, and position before cursor, PPQ, brackets, value, add. And if you want after cursor, change that to beyond cursor, and then it'll select beyond. Hit apply and try it. And that's delete. So change that to select if you just want to select, or delete if you want to delete. Some other useful buttons, they're part of Cubase anyway. Nudge buttons. You can instantly move all your events, your audio events. It speeds up workflow like no tomorrow. Just assign the buttons, I guess. Zoom features, quantize features. Another button that I created was toggle VST. So if you look up here above strings, suddenly I can access all my VST outputs, which, funny enough, I'm actually about to change and put them all in their separate folders, but it's quite handy to have them all there if that's how you work. Same with group channels. All the groups suddenly show up, and same with effects. And there's a couple of features in Cubase that are actually amazing. Show selected tracks only. Let's say that we've only got 2 tracks we're working on, and I don't want to see all the rest of it. I can press show selected tracks, and the entire template just closes to those 2 tracks. That's part of Cubase, so you can just literally load that in. The one that comes with it as standard is show tracks with data on. Now, that's brilliant, but what people fail to tell you is that everyone always has this MIDI data at the start, and I have no idea why mine's a bar long. I need to change that. But if you press show tracks with data on, all of the tracks, even with this data at the start, all show. So what you need to do is, I've called mine show tracks with data from bar 3. So we record from bar 5. I did have it from bar 4, but I always record from bar 4. And if it's touching bar 4, it won't show the tracks. So I have it show tracks with data from bar 3. And it means that I can record from bar 4 and it will still pick up the audio. So if I press that, that should just show those 2 tracks. I have to press it twice for some reason with Metagrid, but when it's on a key command on the QWERTY keyboard once, I have no idea why. But that is such a useful tool. I've got show MIDI tracks with data. I'm already doing that. Show audio tracks. There aren't any, so we're not going to see any. If I press show MIDI tracks with data, it comes up. Then there's obviously show tracks with data cursor, show tracks with data at cursor, which there is none there. There are none there. We press that, then the found. They are well worth having in on your template. So if I show you chamber strings, and then we'll just do this as the last one because this video is probably going on now. Show tracks with data from bar 3 is probably the most useful thing. And we've got to open the PLE this time. I haven't changed the name of it, but if you, I've got a couple of these, basically copy this, but change that to 3. This is obviously not the right one. That's after bar 2. Trust me, type in the right bar number and then it'll work. There must be one somewhere else. Container type is equal to part, or container type is equal to event and position bigger for PPQ and select. And that's how you do that. Well, anyway, hopefully this has been helpful to someone, and good luck with it all, because it's